Hello, can people hear me? I hope so. I'm going to get started. First of all, the first thing we're going to do is run a little video, but before we do that, I just want to give credit to my son, John Hyde, who held the camera for this video. And you'll see my two co-hosts in the video. So John, go ahead and run that, please. Margaret lived happily, tending sheep in the countryside of Asia Minor, until one day she caught the attention of a powerful man because she was so beautiful. Of course, he was a pagan and she was a Christian, so she refused him, and because of that, Margaret was dragged off to prison. She sat in her dungeon cell, praying to God to strengthen her for the ordeal to come. But she was resolved to face martyrdom if need be, but she felt her resolve weakening, so she prayed to God to strengthen her, and he answered in a very unexpected way. Into the cell came something dark and slithering. At first she couldn't see what it was dark, but then the flame came out of its mouth, and she could see that it was a dragon! Oh, horrors! Oh, Lord, protect me from this beast! I cannot defeat it by my own power. You must save me! The dragon loomed over her, its hot breath burning her, and then, oh horrors, it ate her! It swallowed her whole, but she was still alive inside the dragon, just like Jonah in the whale, and she prayed to God to deliver her from this horrible monster. Then she remembered that she had something very powerful. She had a cross. She took the cross from around her neck and lifted it up until it pierced the dragon's skin. And then the dragon exploded! And Margaret was left alone in her cell, triumphant by the power of the cross. Hallelujah! So you've met my two co-hosts, St. Margaret, St. Margaret is only going to be with us for this video. After the video is over, at some point in the future, she is going to be transformed into a Jane Austen heroine. And someday when I'm brave enough, I will make a suitor for her. So goodbye, St. Margaret. Thank you for your help. And our other co-host is Funk the Dragon. Now, Funk is going to be with us the whole time, because if you've read my section of the book, you know that my personal dragon is depression. And that's what I'm going to be talking about today, about ways that we can battle depression. So every time I talk about a new weapon that we can use against Funk, he's going to get stabbed with a knitting needle. I called him Funk partly because of the expression in a blue funk. As you can see, he's blue. But partly because when I'm depressed myself, in a funk is a really good description of the way I feel. It's not so much, that I'm crying every day or dying of sadness. It's just that the world looks stale, flat, and unprofitable. And I'd really prefer not to get out of bed, and I have no motivation to do anything. So this is Funk, and we are going to try to come up with some ways to battle him today. I want to give you a disclaimer up front. I am not any sort of expert, except in terms of having dealt with depression for my entire adult life, which is close to 40 years. So I'm not a psychologist. I'm certainly not any kind of spiritual director or expert about anything. I'm just going to tell you about some things that I have tried. Some things have worked for me. Some things have not worked as well because I wasn't very consistent with them. But everybody is different, and everybody will find different weapons that work better for them. So another disclaimer is COVID is a big factor here, both in terms of, I'm sure that the numbers of people experiencing depression have just about doubled during the pandemic, and also because a lot of the things I'm going to suggest that you could do to battle depression are less practical during COVID, which is really unfortunate. But there are still a lot of things that we can do now, and I hope that you'll be able to implement some of the other things later on. I will be offering, I hope if this is, I'm pretty sure this is possible, I'll be offering a PDF of my slides to be emailed out to you, so you'll have a record of some of the things we've talked about. I am not going to have time for questions at the end, and I won't be able to see any questions that are posted in Zoom while I'm talking. Melinda might be able to get them to me in some other way, but I would ask that if you have, feel free to chat among yourselves to your heart's content, but if you have questions or comments specifically for me, please post them during the break after my talk, and then I'll be back on Zoom and I'll be able to see them and we'll answer as best I can. Okay, John, let's get rolling with those slides. So the section in the book where I talk about my response to the saint is called Battling the Ugly Beast. And he certainly is a very ugly beast. He's very fierce. He's very nasty. Depression takes a lot of forms. It has a lot of causes. People have tried to pin it down to one thing or another, but really it involves the whole person. And so we're going to be talking about it on that level. I'll be saying a lot of things that other panelists have said or will say, because a lot of what you can do to fight depression is just about building a healthy life. If you can, the more healthy things you can bring into your life on every level, the better chance you're going to have of fighting this beast. Okay, next slide, please. So the weapons, I'm going to categorize them in the physical, mental, and creative, emotional and social, spiritual, and then finally I'll talk about medication and therapy. But I do want you to understand that these things are not really separate. They all work together. They all affect each other. Let's see. So we're going to talk about the physical first, because, to paraphrase an old expression, if your body ain't happy, ain't nobody happy. It's just really, really difficult to overcome any kind of physical suffering and battle depression at the same time. And from there on, we'll move on to the mental aspects, just because sometimes that seems like an easier area to address than the emotional. And then we'll talk about spiritual after all of that, because even though it's the most important, I find it intimidating to begin with. And I'll talk more about that when we get there. And then I'm going to address medication and therapy last, and not because I have anything against them or think they're ineffective, but because I think they'll be a lot more effective if you're doing all these other things first. Okay, next slide, please. John, next slide, please. Oh, we seem to be stuck, but before I start listing all these things that you might do, I want to emphasize, please do not be overwhelmed. It is not necessary to do everything. It's only necessary to do something. Anything that I mention that speaks to you, anything that resonates with you, that you think might be possible in your situation, give it a try. If it doesn't speak to you, if you can't imagine how in the world you could possibly pull it off, just ignore it. That's totally fine. But I do want you, while we're talking, and as you take on this battle yourself, to put self-care really high on your list of priorities. Sometimes Christians have a problem with this. That's partly a semantic thing, because the world's idea of self-care is like taking bubble baths, which I actually do every night, but going to the spa, getting drunk with your girlfriends, it's just self-indulgence. And self-indulgence is not going to do anybody any good. But real self-care, where you're taking care of your own health and your spiritual well-being, is extremely important. And if you don't take care of yourself, you won't be able to take care of all the other people in your life. So even if it seems impossible, ask for help for anybody, anywhere you can find it. If you happen to be a single mother, you're most likely to feel this is absolutely impossible, but please, please give it a try. I've been there, by the way. I've been a single mother, and I know how hard it is. So yeah, don't try to do everything at once. Just do one little thing at a time. And if that gives you more energy, then maybe you'll be able to tackle something else. It's a great help if you have a partner that you can talk to about this struggle, but it has to be somebody who will only encourage you and never, ever criticize you or push you, because the last thing you need if you're depressed is any kind of negative feedback. You need somebody who's going to be on your side, applauding you. It might be your spouse if you have a really wonderful, encouraging spouse. It might be a good friend, a sibling. It might be your spiritual father, if he's more available than most have time to be. But just choose somebody who always makes you feel good. And then each day, do only what you can. And celebrate your victories. If you just manage to take a 5-minute walk, then pat yourself on the back. That's great. That's a wonderful thing that you've done for yourself. Or if you put away one thing that has been sitting out and cluttering your house for a year, celebrate it. That's terrific. Okay, next slide, please. So physical, to quote Count Rugen from The Princess Bride, if you haven't got your health, you haven't got anything. I'm going to say this 5-letter word that will probably make a lot of you groan: sleep. I personally have the kind of sleep troubles that come with encroaching age, which means your body just does not want to stay asleep for 8 hours straight. I'm currently visiting my daughter, who has 4 kids, and so her sleep deprivation is definitely due to the children. It seems like almost every stage of a woman's life, there is something, internal or external, that is fighting against us being able to get enough sleep. But it is so, so important. So make every effort that you can to get enough rest, because nothing goes right when you don't. And food is really important too. I'm not a nutritionist. I'm not going to give you, detailed nutritional advice, but I have struggled for many years with diabetes, with full body inflammation, and all kinds of other issues where I've tried various ways of eating. And if you can eat clean, without processed foods, without sugar, and without a whole lot of carbs, then you're setting yourself up for more possibility of success in fighting depression. You probably don't let your children have huge amounts of sugar, because it makes them bounce off the walls. And, it's just as bad for you yourself. I just lost my slide. What happened? Okay, and exercise is also very helpful. I'm not going to say that it's essential. Everybody is different, but I find for myself that if I move, then, it gets the blood flowing. It kind of blows out the cobwebs, gives me a different perspective, makes me feel like I can accomplish something else if I've made myself get some kind of movement into my day. And if you can do that outdoors, that's ideal. Sunshine helps your body make vitamin D, which is very crucial in fighting depression. Vitamin D supplements are a good thing too, especially if you live where you can't get a lot of sunshine, or like me, you can't go outside without slathering yourself with sunscreen. But fresh air just is so important for your outlook. It can just totally change your day, just to take the smallest possible walk in fresh air. And then, if there's something, if your body is telling you that something is specifically wrong in your body, listen to it and do what you need to take care of it. Because there's a lot of physical conditions that can contribute to depression. As I mentioned, I'm diabetic. That contributes to depression. Brain issues like ADHD can contribute to it. And if you're fighting an infection that drains your resources, it can contribute to depression. I've recently come to the conclusion that my allergies are causing a lot of what I've been calling depression. They just completely drain my energy to the point that I have no desire to do anything. Okay, next slide. And your physical surroundings are really important too. I guess I wasn't able to tune into Molly's talk, but I'm sure she talked about a lot of this. Clutter just weighs on the mind and the spirit to a degree that you may not be aware of until you get rid of it. And it doesn't have to, it can be really overwhelming, especially if you have small children with all their mess, or if you've been letting clutter creep up on you over decades. It can seem like there's absolutely no way to plow through. You want a bulldozer, or you even want your house to burn down just so that it'll all go away. I've been there, believe me. But you don't have to tackle it all at once. You can tackle just a tiny bit at a time, one drawer or one shelf, or, just the smallest amount. And usually that will be so satisfying that it will give you energy to go on and do more. I just realized I've been forgetting to stab Funk. We've had all these weapons and I haven't stabbed him at all. So I'm going to stab him now. Everything's backwards here. Okay. And then surround yourself with beauty as much as you can. I'm a big fan of William Morris's saying, have nothing in your home that you do not know to be useful or believe to be beautiful. I like that really a lot better than Marie Kondo's don't keep anything that doesn't spark joy, because, we all have tons of things in our home that don't spark joy, and they have to be there. I'm sorry, but a bottle of toilet cleaner is never going to spark joy, and yet I don't want to be without it. So, it's great if you can just have some things in your home that do spark joy. That is something that is worthwhile. Buy some flowers. If there's something somebody gave you that you hate, go ahead and stuff it in the closet, or get rid of it if that person is not going to be terribly offended, or if they've died by now or live in another state. Or, if you're into crafts, into making things, make something beautiful to adorn your home, or buy some original art if you can afford to. There are, at least where I live, there are many, many artists creating wonderful things, and they're not terribly expensive because these are, they're not recognized artists. They're just doing their own thing. But real art can be affordable. And even, the finger painting that your child did in kindergarten and gave you for Mother's Day, because of the sentiment that's attached to it, that can be beautiful too. But don't let Marie Kondo guilt you into getting rid of your books, whatever you do. Okay, next slide, please. So this quote from Philippians sums up what our mental attitude should be. Finally, brethren, whatever things are true, whatever things are noble, whatever things are just, whatever things are pure, whatever things are lovely, whatever things are of good report, if there is any virtue and if there is anything praiseworthy, meditate on these things. It's extremely difficult to live up to this verse, but it is also extremely important. I think we've all learned that in the last year, that if we pay attention to all the bad things that are happening in the world and all the horrible projections that people are making about what might happen in the future, we'll just go crazy. We have to keep our minds on God, on the good things that people do around us, on just anything that is positive. Next slide, please. You may be familiar with the book called Our Thoughts Determine Our Lives. It's partly by and partly about Elder Thaddeus of Witownica. It's just amazing. That book can revolutionize your life if you haven't read it. That thinking positive isn't just a mental exercise. It's something that actually does have an effect on the world around you. And so I really recommend that book. Another thing that we can do, I have to stab something again here. Another thing we can do is to be really intentional with screen time. Our screens bring us so much of the ugliness in the world. Even apart from just the mental and physical effects of staring at screens all the time, the content of what you see there has about a 75% chance at least of being depressing rather than uplifting. So, you may not be able to avoid social media altogether. You may need it for professional reasons, or that may be your only way of keeping in touch with people during this isolating time. But there are things you can do to make sure that you see less of the things that you don't want to see. Like a month before the election, I snoozed all my friends who talked about the election all the time because that was not a place that I wanted to go. Reading uplifting books is a wonderful thing. I personally am addicted to the classics. I love Jane Austen, Charles Dickens, Ellen Montgomery, Dostoevsky. I find that the classics tend to be more uplifting, partly because the people who wrote them mostly had some kind of concept of God and of a moral universe, and partly because they just knew how to write. I mean, obviously there are good modern writers too, but if you're not acquainted with the classics, I really encourage you to get acquainted with some of them. And then doing something creative on a regular basis. And we have a whole slide about that. So next slide, please. So creativity, some people are a little intimidated by the word creativity because they think that it means, you have to be a real artist. You have to work in a recognized artistic medium, and you have to be really good at it or else you're not being creative. But that's a self-defeating attitude. Anything that creates something, whether it's tangible or not, is creative. Your gift may be making other people happy. That's not tangible, but you've created happiness in that person. And so that's creativity. And most of the ordinary things that women do around their homes count as creativity. Cooking can be very creative. It's not for me, it's not my thing, but it certainly can be. Decorating, even cleaning, if you get a satisfaction out of it. And of course, there are the recognized arts and crafts that if you happen to be drawn to anything, like, if you're drawn to a fiber art or to painting or music, or writing, just try it. Even if you don't think you're good at it, just do it and see if it makes you feel better. If you feel like you're not that good at it, you don't have to share your work with anybody. You can just do it for your own satisfaction. And it really does. It takes you out of yourself. It takes you into the zone, as they say, where the world just kind of fades away and it's just you and your art, whatever that might be. I'm a knitter, as you probably can tell. And repetitive things like knitting can be especially calming. They can be a vehicle for prayer, as I think Summer is going to talk about at more length. So that's a great place to start. If you feel like you don't have any creative outlet in your life, then starting with something like knitting or crocheting or cross-stitching can be a great place to start. But the important thing is to do something that you feel drawn to. If there's something you've always wanted to try or something that you used to love doing, but you haven't had time for it lately, try and make some space for it in your life. And it really will help. Next slide, please. Meanwhile, Funk is going to get another spear in there. Oh, we lost our slides. Okay, emotional. It's kind of difficult sometimes to separate what's mental, what's emotional, what's spiritual. I know I'm saying what other people have said and will say when I remind you to give thanks in everything. It's so important. It will just totally shift your attitude if you remember to give thanks for anything you possibly can. And, start with small, obvious stuff, air, water, your family, whatever. And then it's kind of like a muscle that you can build. You can get to the point where you eventually will be able to give thanks for the difficult things in your life. I have a couple of books that Ancient Faith has recently published can be really helpful in this. One is called, oh gosh, well, what is a Journal of Thanksgiving by Nicole Rokas, where you can actually record, there's a little prompt for each day or a quote for each day, and you can record 3 years worth of gratitude, just a couple sentences a day. And the other one is Gratitude in Life's Trenches by Robin Phillips, which it's a really good book about giving thanks in the really difficult times. So I recommend those. You might want to experiment with journaling. Some people are kind of, journaling evangelists, and they want everybody in the world to do it every single day. And, don't put that pressure on yourself. Some people like to journal and some people don't. Try it if you want to. If it doesn't seem to be your thing, then let it go. But it can be very valuable in helping you to get in touch with your own emotions, with what's going on in your life, to get down to kind of the roots of things that might be going on. Journaling can really help if it's your thing. I strongly urge you to let go of activities and commitments that might be stressing you out. And at this point, you're probably saying, yeah, all those things let go of me last March. And, to me, that's one of the big silver linings of COVID, is that we all suddenly got so much less busy. But there's still things that you might be involved in, in a kind of a virtual level that could be stressful for you. I've had to resign from a couple of boards because I just didn't have the mental or emotional energy for it. And when life does go back to sort of normal, assuming that it does someday, try not to build back in all the activities and commitments that you had before. Just try to be really intentional about what is going to be of the most benefit to you and your family. And don't commit yourself to anything that isn't going to be a positive force in your life. And then, of course, recreation is really important, but it's also important to do things that truly recreate you rather than just, vegetating. I mean, my husband and I vegetate in front of some video most evenings because that's all we have the energy to do. But it's really it will feed you emotionally more. You can spend your recreational time, talking with your family, playing a board game, playing with pets or small children, the have a Zoom call with some of your friends that you're not able to see in person. During the summer, or last spring, actually, my youngest child was in Russia. He was at Valam Monastery for a number of months, and we really missed him, of course. And my other children are scattered around the country, so my son suggested that we have a weekly Zoom call playing an online game. We played a game called I'm sorry, I'm getting aphasic in my old age, and I can't remember the name of it. But anyway, it was a kind of game where you interact with each other a lot. It was about, it was a talking game rather than a role play or anything like that. But it really gave us a chance to interact with each other, and it was extremely. It brought us out of our isolation and into a feeling of connection in a really meaningful way. And, don't be afraid to just be silly. I've always felt like the ability to be silly and to laugh at yourself is so important. I just don't really want to be in any kind of close relationship with anyone who is not able to do those things, because it's kind of a sign of humility, as well as, just a way of interacting positively with other people. Okay, next slide. The social things are really, social things really closely connected with emotional things. Sometimes we are either born into, or we find ourselves in relationships that just sap our energy all the time. And some of those, we can't necessarily get rid of them. But sometimes we can minimize the connection with people who are just a really negative influence. I know I have friends who have had to sever relations with one or both of their parents because their parents had mental illness and there was never any positive interaction. It was just always, always negative. Sometimes we have to accept that we cannot help a certain person, that they have problems that are beyond our ability to help. And not only are they not contributing positively to our well-being, but we're not really contributing to theirs. We may just be enabling them in, some kind of destructive behavior. So if you have a relationship that you really feel is tearing you down, do examine it, at least with the help of maybe your spiritual father or somebody, to see if there's some change you can make in that area of your life. And then the people around you who do build you up, make a real effort to spend time with them. It's so hard when you're feeling depressed to reach out to anybody. I think a lot of depression goes unnoticed by others just because of that. It's so hard to reach out. But if you can just tell your husband, please make plans for us to have a date every so often. Or, tell your best friend, please call me and, we can do an outdoor coffee or take a walk, or just, have a talk over Zoom or something, but get other people to let other people know that you need them to make the effort because you don't have the energy to do it yourself. And finally, when you are able to get your head a little bit above water, it's so good to get out of your house and out of your own head and do something for somebody else. And this does not mean that you need to sign up to work at Soup Kitchen or something like that. It can be something very simple. It can just be calling up a friend who needs some encouragement. Even if you're depressed yourself, chances are you can offer encouragement to somebody else who is also depressed or anxious or whatever. Just do something a little extra for your husband or your children, or any effort that you can make in that direction will help to lift your own mood. Okay, next slide, please. So I said I was saving this spiritual toward the end because it can be intimidating. I think as Orthodox Christians, we tend to think that we ought to be able to solve every problem by prayer or by spiritual disciplines in general. And that I do think it's true that we can't solve anything without prayer, but I also think that prayer is not our only weapon, that we really need to deal with things on these other levels as well. And for myself, I'm lazy. I don't know if it's laziness or what it is, but I have a very difficult time keeping to a consistent prayer rule. And so that's very intimidating for me. So I love Father Thomas Hopko's maxim, pray as you can, not as you think you must. If all you can say is help, then do that, and the Lord will respond. Usually I can manage the Jesus prayer, when I'm feeling particularly stressed, or I can call out to God with a particular need in the moment that it arises. That's usually doable. Sitting down or standing in front of my icons and praying for 15 minutes, not necessarily so. So I do what I can. And I think that God always honors that when you do what you can. This, of course, is a difficult thing right now, but do worship in community as much as you can. I know some places are having services with limited attendance. And this, when the weather was better, some places were worshiping outdoors. Everybody's parish situation probably is different, but if you are able to attend worship, then by all means do so. And if you're not able, maybe you can go into your church when no one else is there and pray there, and just let the atmosphere, the lingering incense in the air and the icons feed your soul. Reading scripture is always great. I suggest if you're depressed, this is not the best time to take on something like reading through the Bible in a year. What might be more doable is just take a small chunk and read it meditatively. Read it to see what God wants to say to you through that passage right now. You might go by the church's lectionary, or you might just have favorites that you go to. How you choose the scripture is less important than just immersing yourself in it. And finally, going to confession. That's also problematic. I guess some priests are probably taking confessions by telephone or by Zoom or something. But if you can go to confession, it's a really good thing to do, because unrepented sin is definitely going to depress you if that's a factor in your life. And I know we're all supposed to do a lifetime confession when we become Orthodox if we're converts. I guess people who are born into the faith don't necessarily have that opportunity. But when I did my lifetime confession, which was actually several years after I became Orthodox, I felt like this incredible burden was lifted off of me. And I've never felt so light or so close to God in my life as I did in the time immediately following that. So that's something that I really recommend. Next slide, please. So finally, we get down to medication and therapy. Excuse me a second. There are a lot of people in the church who are really down on medication and therapy, who think that depression is a purely spiritual problem and ought to be approached in a purely spiritual way. I do not agree, as you've probably figured out by now. Everyone is different. For some people, going straight to medication is amazingly effective. I have friends for whom that was what it took. You know, they may have been in therapy for a long time, may have tried all sorts of other things, never felt better until they tried medication, and then poof, it was like magic. For myself, I'm on the opposite end of the spectrum. I have tried every category of medication, and none of them has worked for me. And I think it's probably because my depression is rooted more in physiological causes. And, you know, therapy can be very helpful if you find a good person to work with, whether it's a priest or a licensed therapist, or someone who's both. That I think would be ideal if you have access to a priest who is also a licensed therapist. Man, use that guy. There again, the effectiveness varies so much with the quality of the therapist, with the relationship between the two of you. But I think it's always worth trying, because it gives you a perspective on your own mental state that you may not be able to achieve on your own. So medication and therapy, it might be the first thing you try, it might be the last thing you try. You may not need them, they may not do you any good. They're just part of the arsenal that is out there. But I would not expect them ever to work miracles on their own. I really do think that doing everything you can to build a healthy life for yourself is super, super important. And, you know, medication can be one piece of that. But it's probably not going to do the job all by itself. I've been neglecting to stab Funk here. He's definitely getting stabbed. Okay. Next slide. We have one more. So you may be familiar with this song by Bobby McFerrin. Don't worry, be happy. It's kind of, you might hear that and think, oh, that's easy for you to say. And, you know, I totally understand that point of view. But for me, when I first heard that song, it is so upbeat and so kind of silly, especially the video that goes with it is really silly. And it's, it just makes you think, you know, there really is an element of choice in whether you're going to be happy or not. There's an element of, you know, you letting go of expectations. If you have the idea, whether it's conscious or not, you know, I need X in my life to be happy, and X doesn't happen, you won't be happy. But if you let go of that idea, you may find lots of other things that could make you happy. You know, choosing to focus on the positive, choosing to give thanks, choosing to associate with people who make you happy. All these things can really contribute. To paraphrase Dumbledore, happiness can be found in the darkest times if you really work at it. And I finished sooner than I thought I would, so I would actually have time to take questions, but that's something that we would have had to work out ahead of time. So I'm not able to get feedback from anybody else while I'm doing this, which is kind of awkward. But if we go ahead and go to the break, then you can give me a couple minutes to log out of this and log into Zoom, and then you can send me questions in the chat, and I will do my best to answer them. So I just want to leave you with the thought that being depressed does not make you a bad person. Being unable to deal with it does not make you a bad person. It makes you a child of God who is hurting, and you deserve all the help that you can get. You deserve to take care of yourself. you deserve to be happy. And to be joyful is probably a better way to say it, to find joy in your life. Because joy can come in moments. Joy can be totally separate from anything that's going on around you. And those moments of joy can light up your life if you can find ways to create them. And sometimes God sends them to us just completely out of the blue. He'll just send us a moment of joy that will make it possible to go on through the difficult times. So thank you very much for being with me, and I look forward to talking with you in the chat.